What is happening, everybody? Dirty D's out here, and do I have a story for you? Check this out. Just last week on Friday, it was announced that one of the last remaining British motorcycle companies, NORTON Motorcycles, was sold to Indian ownership. But here's the real kicker. It was bought dirt cheap after a scandal including ripping off its own employees' retirement plans. After a massive tax embezzlement, bamboozlement, what you want to call it, and it forced them into bankruptcy. In this video, I'm going to do three things. In part one, I'm going to set the scene by giving you a high-level overview of who NORTON Motorcycles is. In part two, I'm going to tell you about this huge money scam, man. I mean, it's insane. It involves a con man. It involves all kinds of twists and turns. I mean, it could really fill up a Netflix series. And if they did that series, it would be about a CEO who had too much money and not enough sense. And then in part three, I'm going to tell you how a company outside of Britain swoops in and snaps up what could turn out to be the deal of the century. And by the way, that outside company doesn't just make motorcycles, as some of you already know. The whole thing leaves us with more questions than answers. Are they moving the motorcycle production out of Britain? What happened to everyone who got scammed? Why did the British government keep giving NORTON millions in loans and grants when they were already up to their eyeballs in debt? Hang on, because this story, which just broke last Friday, has a double plot twist that will make you say WTF. Okay, so a quick history about NORTON Motorcycles. And look, you could fill up volumes of books about the history. I'm going to give you a very brief overview. Here's what you really need to know. NORTON Motorcycles, along with Triumph, BSA, Royal Enfield, and Bro Superior. They are one of the last remaining British motorcycle companies left. They're founded in 1898, best known for killing it on the racetrack, including 78 of 92 Grand Prix races that they won back in the 30s, 94 Isle of Man TT races that they won, some of the biggest names, rivalries, and wins in the world of motorcycle racing. Here's a side note. At the end of this video, I'm going to put a link to a great video on the history of that Isle of Man race by a fellow creator that goes by the name of The 333. Okay, but let's keep rolling about NORTON. In the 70s, they started hitting their stride and kicked off the famous NORTON Girls campaign. And look, you guys know I'd be neglecting my duties if I didn't tell you about the NORTON Girls. But they say a picture speaks 1,000 words, so here you go. Enjoy. Now, during this era, they're going pretty well. Things are humming along. NORTON's finding itself, getting more into the mainstream, which is great. But then came the 80s, and that was not good for the company. That time period, that's where they started hitting the skids. I mean, they're seeing over-competition growing, there are cracks in the company, and they start to fold. And then in the 90s, the rights to the NORTON name, man, that thing gets passed around like a cheap cigar. I'm telling you, people are squeezing that name for all they can get. It's going between multiple countries, multiple companies. You know, NORTON sometimes reminds me of Jodie Foster's character in Taxi Driver. If you haven't seen that movie, you should. Should have settled down with a nice guy, but instead ends up getting pimped out. A tragedy. But just like the movie Taxi Driver, there is a happy ending. We're going to get to that here in a little bit. But first, here comes part two of our story, the scandal. So here's the scene. 2008. Imagine NORTON sitting on the curb, waiting for her next big score. Washed up, ragged out, hadn't made a bike in years, lipstick smeared, wig split, mascara running down her face, looking road hard and put away wet. Just a shell of her former self. And then, when it looked like it had turned its last trick, here comes the knight in shining armor, the ultimate Don Magic Wand entrepreneur, Stuart Garner. Dude's a real estate developer in his 40s. He buys the company within 4 days of starting the negotiations, man. So he's like moving really quick. But here's the thing. Not only does he buy the company, he makes himself the chief executive officer. How crazy is that? The dude buys the company and then says, I'm in charge. Are you, what? So the next year, he takes one of the bikes to the Bonneville Salt Flats and sets a world land speed record of 173 miles an hour, man. Puts his life on the line just to get his company some street cred. I can dig it. But the dude turns out to be a scumbag. Because in 2012 and 2013, this con man named Simon Colfer convinces 228 of their employees to transfer 4 million pounds, British pounds, of their pension retirement into this other scheme. Think about it here in the US, that's like your 401k plan, right? But instead of investing all that money into a bunch of different companies, different investments, unbeknownst to a lot of the employees, all that money goes back into NORTON. around the back door. Not only that, they told the employees they would get a lump sum of money for agreeing to make those transfers and that it would be tax-free. Guess what? They got the money and then they got taxed to the gills. The whole time, Colfer's sitting back and he's getting fees out of those retirement funds. All right, so all this comes to light in 2019 in May. Bunch of allegations start surfacing. These old retired people, man, they can't get their money back out. So what happened to the money? That was gone like the wind, baby. And then at the start of 2020, old Stewart drops a bombshell. Turns out the company owes 600,000 British pounds in back taxes. The British government knocked it down to 300,000, but what's a few hundred thousand among friends, right? I mean, seriously, this whole time, the British government is giving Norton millions in grants and loans to keep them afloat. They're being touted as a role model company. It's like, man, I hope the people giving all these loans to Norton were just not aware. Either that or they were completely incompetent or they were in on the whole thing. I'm not making any assumptions. But in 2020, in January, they end up putting Norton into what they call administration. Basically, it means they're going bankrupt, right? So now let's move on to part 3, the happy ending. And we all love a happy ending, don't we? You excited? I'm excited for you. Check this out. It turns out that there was a second knight in shining armor waiting in the wings last Friday, April 17th of 2020. An Indian motorcycle company called TVS Motorcycle Company, or TVS Motor Company, acquires the whole thing with a cash transaction. But first I'm going to put up some pictures of the kind of machines that TVS is selling right now. Some of these are a trip, man. But remember, they're in India. So a lot of these machines, I guess they make sense out there in the streets in India. About this sale, one of the managing directors of TVS said last week, "We will extend our full support to Norton to regain its glory in the international motorcycle landscape," which is interesting. So does that mean that they're going to go back on the racetrack soon? I'm pretty sure, because TVS's racing division has also been a winner on the track. They've been competing over 30 years in racing and they've won 90% of the races they've competed in. Sounds fishy to me, but maybe they're just that good. They're the 3rd largest motorcycle company in India. They have annual sales of 3 million units. It's the 2nd largest exporter in India with products sold over 60 countries, so they're massive. And in the past, they partnered with Suzuki to build 4 of their bikes. In 2016, they started manufacturing the BMW G310R. And in December 2018, they rolled out their 50,000th BMW. So to answer some of the questions mentioned at the start of this video, what happens to the people who have already put deposits down on new bikes and they haven't received them? Well, in Australia, there's a company called Brisbane Motorcycles. They've already returned those customers' deposits. Everyone else remains to be seen. How did they keep getting grants and loans despite being under a mountain of debt? Well, the UK government is now investigating almost 8 million British pounds in funding and loans. There are allegations that Garner blew the money on fast cars and a fast lifestyle. All right, here's the other piece. Will the old folks get their pensions back? That's the one I'm most concerned about. I mean, will production stay in Britain? Is it going to move to India? I don't know, man. Here's one thing I do know for sure, though. Norton keeps fighting to stay in the ring longer than anyone thinks they have the right to. And I have a feeling that the old girl has a few tricks up her sleeve that she still needs to turn. So let's hope that her new sugar daddy treats her like the queen she's always been and doesn't let her run the streets with any old dirtbag that can make change for a $20 bill. And speaking of, I'm wishing you a great rest of the week. Ride safe, ride well. Let me know what you think in the comments about this thing. I mean, iconic British brand getting bought by an Indian motorcycle company? Insane. But don't forget, the most important part of this whole thing, man, try to get your bikes out there in the streets if you can. Make sure you're wrapped up, strapped up, and ready to roll, because come sooner or later, I want to see you guys out there in the mother humming streets, baby. Peace out. Norton, keep it rolling, man. Y'all still alive. You got that pulse pump.